Me, 20M, went on a date with a 20F, and I feel like a monster now. What do I do? This will be my first ever post here or on Reddit as whole, and I'm not sure if I'll ever have the guts to post it. Maybe part of me just wants to write it down. But here we go. I'm a 20-year-old man and I'd regard myself as pretty lucky. I've got a great job that I'm very proud of, great friends, and overall have a pretty great time. But today I've just been hit with something I've never faced before, and it feels like I'm in freefall. Please read if you have time. I'm sorry. It will be long. The only thing I feel is missing from my life is a partner to share it with. I've been on a few dating apps for a while. Often chats continue for a few days, weeks, then fizzle out. But on occasion you can tell there is a spark. This happened a couple weeks back where I met a lady, 20F. We had a rocky start, as she said she was having a rough time. But after a few days something suddenly clicked and we hit it off. We'd talk all day, every day, with lightning fast replies. We stayed up late calling and texting, and it really felt like the start of something interesting. We were both pretty open and fairly on. I knew she was a very sensitive person who had struggled with various traumas in the past. She never gave specifics but said there were some things that haunted her, and I'm not one to pressure on people's personal lives if they don't want to share. I'd talk about the idea of a date after a few days and she agreed, but said she'd like some time to get more comfortable first before we planned a day. And then a few days after that she asked if I was free on the weekend. I gave her a few restaurant choices and we picked a really nice upmarket restaurant in my city. I was nervous but excited. We get to the day and I was waiting for the "you're gonna hate me" message. But what came instead was a cute phone call organizing the fine details. We both seemed excited and she even offered to let me park at her house to save me some money on overnight parking. I was planning on a taxi home. I get to hers and she's everything I imagined, and we Uber to our dinner. From the moment we met, bar the obvious shaky first words, we got on like a house on fire. I've never met anyone like it. We talked for hours and hours. Never a dry moment. So many smiles. So many laughs. It almost didn't feel real. I felt us both get more and more comfortable, and we both just were open books. She began mentioning how members of her family would like me. We talked about fun places to go next on other dates and lots of other cute specifics I won't bore you with. After a few hours we left the restaurant and went to a nice cocktail bar and had a cute little walk. They're holding hands and still chatting. Once at the bar I joked about the poor menu, as it didn't have my favorite, to which she offered to go back to hers as she had a great drink selection. I agreed, and after our drink we Ubered back. I sat down in her kitchen, but she instead invited me into her room where we continued where we left off, cuddled, and then had our first cute kiss. I told her to put on her favorite movie, but we didn't really pay attention and just continued to kiss and then undress each other, which then led to her underwear coming off and my hands wandering, for lack of a better word. Everything seemed great at this point. She began leaving hickeys, which I don't mind. We had spoken quite in depth previously about what we like sexually, so I just tried to follow what she had told me. After a little while I then took my underwear off and we began to have sex. Once again, no verbal or physical communication that this was going too far. But after no more than half a minute, I noticed something was off. Her eyes were shut, love's eye contact, and she wasn't reacting to what I was doing. I then immediately stopped because it was clear to me she was upset. I pulled away. She turned away and started crying. I was so shocked. I had no idea what was up or what to do. I covered her back up with the sheets. Tried to comfort her by playing with her hair or scratching her back. Of course, trying to talk to her and getting her a drink of water. I wouldn't get any verbal response. She would just occasionally squeeze my hand tightly when I held it. After a good 10/15 of a minute of this, she began to calm slightly and I managed to get her dressed and we cuddled and laid there. Eventually I asked her what was wrong. I never got a crystal clear answer, but she just said that some trauma in the past had caused her body to react like this sometimes. She said it had happened plenty of times before and I felt so relieved that, although still horrible, I hadn't hurt her or necessarily caused this all myself. If that makes sense. We just cuddled until we fell asleep. She kept apologizing but I made it very clear she had no reason to be sorry. The cuddling continued for a couple of hours in the morning, until I gave her a lift to an appointment she had somewhere. When I got home, I sent a message thanking her for the night and she thanked me too, but then started to type a long message, and this is what has devastated me. The message started with, "What you did last night wasn't right," and continued to go on about how I didn't make sure she was comfortable, didn't ask if things were okay, and had revived her trauma of the past, which was in complete contrast to what had been said the night before. I responded just by apologizing profusely, saying I had no idea I was causing harm and that I had no bad intentions, and immediately stopped when I sensed anything was off. She acknowledged and understood that I had no bad intentions and instead put it down just to ignorance of how comfortable I understood her to be. She basically said that she didn't want anything to happen, which went through me like a bullet. The back and forth continued. It was pleasant, not angry or arguing, and although it was horrible to read, she was well spoken in the way she explained things. I asked if this had ruined any prospect of seeing each other again, to which she said she needed time to think about it, which I gave her. A few hours later I got an even worse message. She just said she simply couldn't do it, that she was already in a rough place and what I did was the worst thing I could have done to her, saying that she felt stupid and naive and that what happened had ruined her. I didn't know how to react. I, maybe mindlessly, just repeated what I'd said before. I had no bad intentions, had no idea any harm was being caused, and that if in the coming days, weeks or months she wanted to try things again, that I'd love to prove that to her. She replied that this would never be the case, and shortly after I was blocked on the 2 main platforms. I'm pretty sure there would still be a way to contact her if I wanted to, but I doubt that's a good idea right now. I'm at a loss. I feel terrible. I don't want to bring up the R word, but that's what it feels like. Knowing how I made her feel is the most gut-wrenching thing I've ever experienced. I've felt hollow all day. Just a deep sinking feeling that hasn't gone away since that first message. I'd always pride myself in being the nice guy and always told I'm very respectful and nice. Yet how can that be when I've caused so much pain? And it's a double-edged sword, because at the same time is feeling horrible for how she feels. It really felt so special the past 2 weeks, and to have such a nice, pleasant young lady and the prospect of so much future fun ripped from you so unexpectedly is also an awful feeling. The entire night has been running through my head all day, just as I'm trying to pick apart where it all went wrong. What did I miss? What did I do? And how could I have been better? I had no verbal indicators, no physical, and she even said herself that she froze and didn't know how to stop it. I feel like such a monster, but with all my heart swear to myself that I was being as considerate as possible the entire night. I didn't want to be too forward in conversation. I was hesitant about grabbing her hand for the first time. There were times on our walk where she stopped and stared like she wanted a kiss, but I even waited till it was glaringly obvious she did back at hers. I was even somewhat proud of how I handled the original situation at calming her down. She's always going to think this of me. I somehow ruined a fairy tale date, and that R word just keeps floating around in my head. I don't know how that will ever leave me or if it'll ever leave her. I'm just rambling at this point. but I don't know what to do. I feel sick. I need help, but I don't know what that is or if I even deserve it. I'm sorry for all of this. She said it had happened plenty of times before. I've walked through this and I don't see any red flags from your end. Of course, without her input, it's all speculation. But I wonder if she's thinking that if she finds the right person, doing the right things, her trauma won't be triggered. Which is not how I think that works. So she gets triggered again. And traumatized again. Which makes you the wrong person to her. And it sounds like she has cycled through this repeatedly. It's been a few hours since I've posted this and I'm overwhelmed by the responses. I was really in a state typing it, but the responses have calmed that shock. I'm not here to play a blame game. There was no winners out of any of this. But knowing the majority think I took reasonable action is comforting to an extent. I know now I should be a lot more verbal, regardless of any discussions that took beforehand. Thank you also to those who have also suffered trauma in the past. I'm so sorry you went through that. But thank you from the bottom of my heart for mentioning those experiences and helping out a stranger. I'm gonna focus on myself for a little while. The idea of anyone else being involved is petrifying at the moment. But I will be better when the day comes again. Thank you all. Being honest from what you've said here. You didn't do anything wrong. You were both getting physical. She was leaving hickeys on your skin and you stopped immediately when you registered that something felt off. The fact that you were emotionally engaged with her enough to know that something was off is actually a huge deal. You picked up on her nonverbal signs and then spent the entire night trying to comfort her. I'm not about to diminish whatever trauma has taken place in her life, but she can't blame you for it either. And that seems to be what's happening. If she wasn't forthcoming about her trauma or what might happen if the two of you got physical, that's on her, not you. You aren't a mind reader and she shouldn't be blaming you for doing something awful when this happened mutually between the two of you. She clearly needs to seek professional help to overcome what has happened in her past. And it's not fair of her to twist the night so that she can place herself as a victim in your hands. However nice she may have been, I wouldn't reach out to her again. She doesn't sound particularly stable. Hey, you were a perfect gentleman and a mensch. Your date has issues. She told you so herself. And apparently, she has not dealt with those issues as well as she perhaps thought she had. It sucks. But that's for her to deal with. Perhaps you didn't have the right words. But then again, you were not expecting to be an emergency support system. I think a bit of grace and a lot of slack can be extended both ways. While this was a traumatic experience, you may have bit the bullet here by finding out early what you were dealing with here. She's not emotionally ready to deal with you or anyone. Cock it up to lesson learned and use some of the good ideas here to your future dates. You didn't rape anyone. You sound like a good guy. Find a good girl. Not this one. I'll be real, from what you said you didn't do anything inherently wrong. In fact, I think she is more to blame than you. Which I may get flamed for, but oh. It sounds like her past trauma made her realize she was not ready and she was ashamed. Blaming you and hiding was easier than admitting she needs help. Now for future reference, I have never had an issue with a girl if I ask before I first kiss her. Never. If I ask before I first touch her down below. Never if I ask before first penetration. If you want to play it safe and not get railroaded by miscommunication or games, do these 3 every time. You are not her therapist nor a mind reader. In no way am I blaming her because she didn't ask for the trauma in her life. You are young, but when you said trauma in her past, I immediately saw red flag and knew exactly where it was going. Next time, before you start, always make it a habit to say, "Are you good with this?" to protect yourself. You can do it in a way that doesn't seem awkward or kill the mood. Whisper in her ear how turned on she makes you and that you want to do X, Y, Z to her. That gives her the opportunity to say no. She invited you into her bedroom, mutually engaged in sexual activities. And then it was you who realized something was wrong and stopped it and tried to make sure she was okay. While I understand some girls, women have a hard time in the heat of the moment to communicate they are uncomfortable, it's extremely unfair to expect men to be mind readers and ask questions every 5 seconds to their comfort. I don't ask men constantly, can I kiss you? Is this okay? Can I touch your penis? Are you comfortable? Did she ask you if she could leave marks on your body prior to giving you hickeys? Prob not. Lol. Women have a right to stop at any moment. And they deserve a partner who pays attention to cues to their comfort and enjoyment level. But this was the first time y'all met. You had no expectations and you talk highly about her and apparently tried hard to ensure her comfort. I don't think you did anything wrong. I think her reaction is extremely unfair. Her trauma may have made her feel this way and that's valid, but that still doesn't mean you did something wrong. But to protect yourself in the future, I'd refrain from having sex on the first date. Maybe wait until the third at least, even if she's wanting to sooner. Verify prior to oral, penetrative sex that it's truly what she wants. Sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry to say. I don't think this girl is ready for a relationship with anyone. Speaking from a woman's perspective, reading this was shocking. It sounded like things were going well and it seemed consensual. I personally don't think you assaulted her. She just sadly went to a dark place. Briefly. Which was not expected at all. She is blaming you heavily here. Which is wrong of her. I personally think that you should not engage in a physical relationship until she gets a therapist and has many sessions. If I were you, I would feel it out and see if a friendship is even possible after this. Again, you are not at fault. You will just have to feel out if she is open to being friends. I seriously though would not recommend dating her as is right now. It is not a punishment to her for you to not want to seriously date her. If she pushes for it in the future and you find you are weary of it, just tell her that you'd rather her work on herself first before you two take that step. That is if you even want to attempt to be friends. P.S. I wouldn't tell her to get a therapist if you plan to be friends. She needs to help herself in this case. If you don't plan to be friends, then go ahead and kindly but bluntly tell her that she should seek some help. I'm not sure that I would recommend friendship, but that is your call. Just please do not feel guilty for whatever choice you make here, as it is not your job to heal her traumas. Read your post in the thread. I had some different thoughts. I'm 43 and experienced a very nasty sexual assault in my early 20s. I also worked in mental health for almost 10 years and the lady is setting off alarm bells. First red flag: be wary of any person that pulls you in at the start talking about their past traumas. Also be wary of people who pull you in talking about how practically everyone in their life mistreats them in some way. Except you. You're the good guy and they shower you with compliments and say you're their new favorite person. A lot of this can often be an indicator that the person identifies themselves mainly as a victim. Also, be wary of the I hate you, now I love you dynamic. I would suggest you read about borderline personality disorder. It's just Reddit, so I've got only a bit to go by. But this lady sounds like she may have BPD. In which case, she may be a victim of trauma or she may not. But you don't want to be involved with someone with clearly untreated BPD. Plus, if she does have BPD, I would predict that she tries to reconnect with you to continue some sort of relationship. As bizarre as that sounds, she may even expect huge amounts of groveling and begging to try to keep her. Either way, You did not assault this lady if what you wrote is true. If this woman is this intent on seeing herself as a victim, she shouldn't be dating. Her behavior is coming across as being incredibly and disturbingly manipulative. Even though she may not be 100% consciously aware of what she's doing, I'd say run as fast as you can from this lady, and stop letting her manipulate you into feeling badly, especially as she's falsely accusing you of sexual assault. She's the one with issues, not you. I think others have chimed in with advice that I really resonate with. This is a tricky situation. You sound like a good dude who truly cares and had no bad intentions. Whenever I, 26M, am with a new partner, I always take the lead on the consent discussion. Whether it's a flat-out talk before anything happens, or as a gradual progression, I always check in throughout. In the future you could ask stuff like, is this alright? Does that feel good? Can I do this? Are you feeling comfortable? Quote, communication is so important, and consent is sexy. I hope you're able to see eye to eye on this. Look man, you didn't do anything wrong. I read the whole thing twice, just to make sure I didn't miss anything in there. This sounds like it was a very difficult situation where you really didn't have any way of knowing exactly what the triggers might have been. I most certainly am not going to fault her either, because given her response, while her words are saying, you should have known this would trigger me, deep down something leads me to believe that she didn't know she would have that reaction. There are two things that I hope you take to heart from some random guy on Reddit. 1. You are an admirable man. This situation could have gone very, very badly if you weren't. You wouldn't be feeling the way you do if you were not an upstanding gentleman doing all the right things. If you were an ass, you would have just called her a cocktease and not even bothered to share. Something that I know was most difficult. Point 2. It is okay if you need to talk to someone about this. Perhaps a professional. Because you have to understand that even though no one may have been physically harmed, you were just as traumatized by this experience as she was. And it is okay and natural for you to do whatever you need to for yourself to get past this as well. I sincerely wish you all the best here. No need for you to suffer in a vacuum and try to answer all of these questions by yourself. Other commenters have done a really great job of addressing various points, and I don't feel the need to reiterate them. The only things I'll add is that it's unclear who removed her panties, but that might be something you want to leave up to the lady in the future. The moment you took them off, if you did, could have started the trauma cascade. As for asking permission, if someone is kissing you, you generally don't need permission to kiss them back, but the thing you should be asking about is if you can stick your penis inside of her. Some kind of verbal communication beforehand, like telling her you want to, or asking her what she wants you to do to her. Anything along those lines where you are sure that she wants the same thing you do. I'm 22F with BPD. I'm not an armchair psychiatrist, but this sounds a lot like BPD to me. From the fairy tale strong connection to the nonsensical perceived harms, I would look into it if I were you. I'm sorry this happened to you. It sounds like one of the worst parts is the loss of a potentially great relationship. But there is nothing you did wrong in this situation. But you can't play the what if game because you're going to drive yourself crazy. You know you had no bad intentions, and she knows that as well. That's really all that matters. If she's choosing to react and respond in this way due to past trauma, then that's just something she needs to continue to work through. But don't beat yourself up over it. You didn't intend or do any harm intentionally. You cannot help avoid trauma if you don't know what it is. The fact that you're eaten up inside over what you could have done differently says a lot about your character. Continued to go on about how I didn't make sure she was comfortable. Didn't ask if things were okay and had revived her trauma of the past. It sounds like she had some form of sexual trauma. You could have done everything right, like it sounds from your perspective, and she still could have reacted like this. She wasn't ready to go on a date that led to anything in bedroom. She invited you up, undressed with you, left hickeys, etc. Any normal person would think it's leading to sex if the other party didn't say otherwise. You tried doing what she said she liked. Then, you noticed something was off. If she was saw, then her assaulter may have done something like this and her body froze and she reacted as such. You stopped and didn't pester for anything else. She may have wanted something more comforting. But it doesn't sound like any red flags or stop signs were given to you. You don't have to feel like you have to read someone's mind if you communicate with words instead of relying on nonverbal cues, which, as you've discovered, are ambiguous and unreliable. At a minimum, it's a good idea to ask with words if having penetrative sex is okay. Everyone should communicate. But if you're putting something inside someone else's body, you should confirm that it's okay with that person. Forget the fairy tale. She is not ready for a relationship with anyone. She needs therapy to work through her issues and her trauma surrounding intimate relationships. Instead of doing the hard work herself, she is looking for someone to share her pain and fix her. That's not your job. At 20 you need to date and have fun. Casual dating. Never rush commitment. Learn about relationships and what you want in a partner. Don't ride around on your white horse picking up damaged people. Look for a partner. You're equal or better. Physically and mentally healthy and competent. Able to take care of themselves. Someone who gives as much as they take. You did nothing wrong. Kiddo. You're okay. This sucks for both of you and it's not either one of your faults. She has her stuff to work through and you seem like a compassionate person. You're not a rapist and you're not responsible for her. Completely valid, if wildly unexpected, emotional response. Next time either just ask for consent outright. I usually just kinda playfully ask if they want to have sex. Or use your dirty talk game to that end by saying stuff like, "You like it when I do blank?" Or, "Tell me what you want me to do next," or whatever. Also, and this should go without saying, do not have further contact with this woman. If she's feeling as upset as you say, it helps nothing and nobody for you two to interact. I agree with the general responses here. I'd add 2 things. 1. Enthusiastic consent should be at the forefront of your mind, especially as you knew she had a trauma history. A lot of people here are saying she let you into her room, she did this, she did that, and that's all true and points toward consent. But when it came down to brass tacks, even before her freeze, it does sound like she was enthusiastic. At that point you were leading with the unfortunately typical "I'm going to press forward till she stops me, I sense withdrawal." This approach used to be considered okay, but in hindsight it's not enough. If you're not familiar with enthusiastic consent as a thing, please do some learning and make sure your friend circle is on it. In a typical scenario it's easy to qualify as enthusiastic. But if you'd been thinking this way, things wouldn't have progressed. Ringer being triggered. As best as I can tell from the post, boomers think EC is ridiculous and unnecessary, but so is global warming to them. 2. It moved awfully quickly once you met in person. I know Tinder is full of hookups etc., but even for non-traumatized people the pace and intensity of connection that you described is over the top. Perhaps you were selling the connection to make sex seem more understandable, but moving at lightning pace, especially in a properly romantic way, as opposed to hot DTF hookup, which moves fast by design, is considered a red flag. If she is inexperienced, it would have seems like a whirlwind of amaze balls, and here hard-learned self-care precautions might have gone out the window. Note the regret the next day about where it ended up. That pace creates the opportunity for misunderstandings, railroading, and in some cases even abuse. But all told, you handled yourself about as well as can be expected of a 20-year-old. In a lot of ways. Way better than a lot of most men. Don't beat yourself up, but be sure to learn what you can so in the future you are an even better version of yourself.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.